The grand piano sat untouched in the corner of the music room, gathering dust beneath the soft light that filtered through heavy curtains. Sophia paused in her dusting, the cloth hovering mid-air as her eyes drifted toward the magnificent instrument. Her fingers twitched at her side, almost feeling the cool ivory keys beneath them. "I believe I hired you to clean, not daydream." The voice startled her back to reality. Sophia spun around, nearly dropping her duster. Richard Hargrove stood in the doorway, his tall frame filling the entrance, arms crossed over his expensive suit. His face held that expression she'd quickly grown to recognize, a mixture of impatience and barely disguised contempt. "I'm sorry, Mr. Hargrove," she said, quickly resuming her dusting of the bookshelf. "I was just wasting time I'm paying you for," he finished, checking his watch. "The East Wing still needs attention, and you've been in here for 15 minutes. Sophia bit her lip, holding back words that would surely cost her this job. A job she desperately needed. Instead, she nodded and gathered her cleaning supplies. As she moved to leave the room, Richard's eyes followed her, then drifted to the piano. Something flickered across his face, a shadow of emotion quickly masked. "That piano is not to be touched," he said, his voice oddly tight. "Not by anyone. Understood?" "Yes, sir," Sophia replied, slipping past him into the hallway. This had been her life for the past 2 weeks, cleaning the massive Hargrove estate from sunrise to sunset, trying to become invisible whenever its owner appeared. The pay was better than anything else available in town, but the working conditions were challenging. Sophia hadn't planned on becoming a housekeeper. 6 months ago, she'd been preparing for an audition that could have changed everything. But life had other plans. In the kitchen that evening, Sophia made herself a quick cup of tea before heading home. Mrs. Wallace, the cook, was the only other staff member who showed her any kindness. "Don't take it personally, dear," the older woman said, slicing vegetables for tomorrow's meals. "He treats everyone that way since his wife passed. Like we're all just furniture that occasionally needs to be scolded." Sophia warmed her hands around the mug. "How long ago did she die?" "Almost a year now, cancer," Mrs. Wallace sighed. "She was the one who brought music into this house. Always playing that piano. The complete opposite of him, warm, laughing, full of life. He's never been the same since." Sophia nodded, thinking of the dusty piano. What a shame for such a beautiful instrument to sit unused, unloved. "Well, I'd better head out," she said, rinsing her mug. "My mother will be waiting up." The walk home took 20 minutes, through the wealthy neighborhood where the Hargrove mansion stood proud on its hill, down to the modest apartment complex where Sophia now lived with her mother. The evening air was cool, and she pulled her worn jacket tighter around herself. Her mother was awake when she arrived, sitting in her wheelchair by the window. "There you are," Lena Chen smiled, her eyes crinkling at the corners. Though only 58, the stroke had aged her beyond her years. "How was work today?" "Same as usual," Sophia answered, setting down her bag and kissing her mother's cheek. "The house is enormous. I don't think I'll ever get it all clean. And the man?" "Your boss?" Sophia shrugged. "Still acts like I might steal the silverware if he doesn't watch me closely enough." Her mother chuckled softly. "Give him time. Not everyone has an open heart." Sophia helped her mother to bed before settling at their small kitchen table with a stack of bills. The rent was due next week, and her mother's medication costs had gone up again. The housekeeping job at the Hargrove estate paid better than her previous positions, but it still barely covered their expenses. Before the stroke, her mother had been a music teacher at the local community center, passing on her love of classical music to neighborhood children. It was her mother who had first placed Sophia's tiny fingers on piano keys when she was just 4 years old. "You have a gift," her mother had always told her. "Your music speaks when words fail." By 16, Sophia had earned a scholarship to study at the prestigious Eastman School of Music. Her future had seemed set, until her mother's stroke 3 years later. Sophia had left school immediately, returning home to care for the woman who had sacrificed everything for her. Now, at 26, her dreams of becoming a concert pianist seemed as distant as the stars visible through their apartment window. Sophia opened her laptop and clicked on an email from the hospital. Another bill, another payment plan to negotiate. She rubbed her tired eyes and closed the computer. Tomorrow would be another long day at the Hargrove estate. Morning came too quickly. Sophia arrived at the mansion at 7 sharp, letting herself in through the service entrance. The house was quiet, Mr. Hargrove likely still asleep in the master suite on the third floor. She started in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Wallace clean up after preparing Mr. Hargrove's breakfast tray. "He has guests coming this evening," Mrs. Wallace informed her. "Important business associates. Everything needs to be perfect." Sophia nodded, adding extra attention to the dining room to her mental list. As she worked through the morning, dusting intricate moldings and polishing already gleaming furniture, her mind drifted to the melody she'd been composing in her head during yesterday's commute. It had been months since she'd touched a piano. The community center where her mother had taught had an old upright she used to practice on during lunch breaks at her previous job. But since starting at the Hargrove estate, her schedule left no time for such luxuries. By noon, she'd finished the lower floor and moved upstairs, careful to avoid the third floor where Mr. Hargrove had his home office. The second floor contained several unused guest bedrooms and a library that smelled of leather-bound books and wood polish. As she worked, Sophia hummed quietly to herself, fingers sometimes tapping against the feather duster in rhythm with the music in her head. "What are you singing?" She jumped, nearly knocking over a crystal vase. Richard Hargrove stood in the doorway of the library, watching her with an unreadable expression. "I'm sorry," she said automatically. "I didn't realize you were home. My meeting was canceled." He stepped into the room, hands in the pockets of his tailored trousers. "You didn't answer my question." Sophia hesitated. "Just something I made up. A habit when I work." His eyebrows rose slightly. "You compose music?" "Sometimes." "Nothing serious." She turned back to the bookshelf, uncomfortable under his scrutiny. "Just melodies that come to mind." He made a non-committal sound and moved toward the desk, picking up some papers. "As I mentioned to Mrs. Wallace, I'm having guests tonight. The dining room, I've already given it extra attention," Sophia assured him. "And I'll set the table once I finish up here." He looked mildly surprised, then nodded. "Good. They'll be here at 7. He turned to leave, but paused at the door. That melody, it was interesting. Before she could respond, he was gone. Later, as Sophia arranged crystal glasses and fine china on the dining table, she found herself wondering about Richard Hargrove. Mrs. Wallace had mentioned he was only 35, young to be so successful and so alone. Despite his wealth, something about him seemed hollow, as if the grand house were merely a shell containing an empty space where happiness should be. She was putting the final touches on the table when he appeared again, dressed now in an evening suit that emphasized his tall, lean build. "Is everything prepared?" he asked, inspecting her work. "Yes, sir." Sophia stepped back, letting him examine the table setting. He circled the table, adjusting a fork slightly, then nodded. "Acceptable." He glanced at her, taking in her simple uniform, black pants and white button-up shirt. "You'll need to help serve tonight. Jerome will handle the drinks, but you'll assist with the food service." Sophia blinked in surprise. Serving wasn't in her job description, but she knew better than to point that out. "Of course. Mrs. Wallace will show you what to do." He straightened his already perfect tie. "And remember, these are important clients. Discretion is essential." "I understand." As the evening approached, Sophia helped Mrs. Wallace prepare the final touches on an elaborate meal, while Jerome, the part-time butler who came in for special occasions, prepared the bar in the sitting room. "Just follow my lead," Mrs. Wallace told her. "Serve from the left, remove from the right. Don't make eye contact, don't speak unless spoken to." The guests arrived precisely at 7, 3 men and 2 women in expensive clothes, with the confident air of people accustomed to wealth and power. Sophia remained in the kitchen until Jerome signaled it was time to serve the first course. The dinner proceeded smoothly. Sophia moved silently around the table, serving dishes and removing plates. The conversation flowed around her as if she were invisible. Discussions of investments, property developments, profit margins. It wasn't until dessert that one of the women, noticing the piano visible through the open doors of the adjacent music room, commented, "Richard, I didn't know you played." A brief silence fell over the table. Richard's fingers tightened around his wine glass. "I don't," he said shortly. "It was Eleanor's." The woman looked embarrassed. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to." "It's fine," Richard cut her off, his tone making it clear it wasn't fine at all. "Coffee, anyone?" As Sophia poured coffee, she noticed Richard's eyes drift toward the piano, that same shadow crossing his face she'd seen before. Loss, she realized. Not anger or annoyance, but profound grief. Later, after the guests had departed and she'd helped clean up, Sophia found herself drawn once more to the music room. In the dim light, the piano seemed to call to her, a silent invitation she knew she shouldn't accept. "It's a Steinway." She turned to find Richard standing in the doorway. His tie loosened, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. "I'm sorry," she said, stepping away from the piano. "I was just admiring it. Do you play?" he asked, entering the room. "Actually play, not just those melodies you hum." Sophia hesitated, then nodded. "I used to. Used to." He took a sip from his glass. "People don't typically forget how to play. Life happens," she said simply. "Other things take priority." He studied her for a long moment, then set his glass down on a side table. "Play something." Sophia stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "Play something," he repeated, gesturing toward the piano. "You've been staring at it since you started working here. Show me what you can do." "Mr. Hargrove, I consider it part of your job interview," he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a request. "I should know what skills my staff possesses." Sophia swallowed hard, looking at the magnificent instrument, then back at her employer's inscrutable face. Slowly, she moved to the piano bench and sat down, removing the cloth that protected the keys. The ivory felt cool and familiar beneath her fingers as she placed her hands in position. She took a deep breath and began to play. The moment Sophia's fingers touched the keys, the world around her faded. She forgot about Richard standing behind her, about being a housekeeper, about all the worries that had weighed her down for months. There was only the music. She played Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece her mother had taught her when she was 12. The melody flowed from her fingers as naturally as breathing, filling the room with its gentle, haunting beauty. Sophia closed her eyes, letting the music carry her away to a different time, a different life. When the final notes faded into silence, she sat motionless, almost afraid to break the spell. Then she remembered where she was and whose piano she was playing. She turned slowly on the bench to face her employer, expecting anger or dismissal. Richard Hargrove stood perfectly still, his face partially hidden in shadow. For a long moment he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Sophia's hands folded in her lap. "My mother taught me when I was young. She was a piano teacher, and then..." She hesitated. "I studied at Eastman School of Music for 3 years. Richard moved closer, his expression now visible in the soft light. He didn't look angry. He looked confused. "Eastman. That's one of the top music schools in the country." His eyes narrowed. Why would someone with that background be cleaning houses? The question stung, though she knew he hadn't meant it that way. "Life doesn't always go as planned, Mr. Hargrove. My mother had a stroke. I came home to take care of her." She stood up, smoothing her uniform pants. "I should finish cleaning the kitchen before I leave." "Wait." Richard's command stopped her halfway to the door. "Play something else." Sophia turned back, uncertain. "Mr. Hargrove, it's getting late, and I'll pay you extra." He reached for his wallet. "Consider it a private performance." "I don't want your money," she said, then quickly added, For playing, I mean. If you want me to play again, I will. But not for payment." Richard studied her face as if trying to solve a puzzle. Finally, he nodded and gestured toward the piano. "Please." Sophia returned to the bench, thinking for a moment before deciding on Debussy's Clair de Lune. As she played, she sensed Richard moving to stand by the piano, watching her hands dance across the keys. The piece was more technically demanding than the Chopin, but Sophia lost herself in its dreamy, impressionistic beauty. When she finished, Richard was leaning against the piano, his earlier detachment replaced by genuine interest. "You're very good," he said simply. "Thank you. Why did you stop?" "After leaving school?" Sophia closed the piano lid gently. "There wasn't a choice to make. My mother needed me, and there was no money for caregivers." She stood up. "Music requires complete dedication. You can't become a concert pianist part-time." Richard's gaze was intense. "Do you miss it?" The question caught her off guard. Did she miss it? Music had been her whole life, her identity. "Every day," she admitted. "But we don't always get what we want." Something flickered in his eyes. Recognition, perhaps. "No," he agreed quietly. "We don't." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them. Sophia glanced at her watch. It's nearly 10. I really should finish up and go. My mother will be worried. Richard seemed to snap out of whatever thoughts had captured him. Of course. You can leave the kitchen for tomorrow. He straightened, once again the employer rather than the audience. Good night, Miss Chen. Good night, Mr. Hargrove. Sophia gathered her things quickly and left through the service entrance. The night air was cool against her flushed face as she walked home, her mind replaying what had just happened. After weeks of being invisible to him, of being just a housekeeper, he had seen her, really seen her, for the first time. Her mother was asleep when she arrived home, a half-finished crossword puzzle on her lap. Sophia gently removed it and helped her mother into a more comfortable position without waking her. Then she sat at their small kitchen table, her fingers still tingling from playing a real piano again. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of the person she used to be. Morning came too soon. Sophia arrived at the Hargrove estate expecting things to be different somehow, but the house was silent and still as always. Mrs. Wallace informed her that Mr. Hargrove had left early for a business trip and wouldn't return until the following day. He left this for you, the cook said, handing Sophia a sealed envelope. Inside was a handwritten note. The piano is not to be played when I have guests or business associates in the house. Otherwise, you may use it when your work is done. Sophia read the note twice, surprised by the unexpected permission. She tucked it into her pocket and began her usual cleaning routine, but her steps were lighter, her mind already anticipating the music she would play later. The day passed quickly. By late afternoon, Sophia had finished her tasks and found herself once again in the music room, this time with permission. She opened the piano and began with simple scales to warm up her fingers, then moved into a Bach prelude, reveling in the perfect action of the keys and the rich, resonant tone of the Steinway. She played for nearly an hour, moving from Bach to Beethoven to Rachmaninoff. When she finally stopped, her arms ached pleasantly and her spirit felt rejuvenated in a way it hadn't in years. For the next 3 days, Sophia fell into a new routine. She would arrive early, work efficiently through her tasks, and then spend an hour at the piano before heading home. Without Richard in the house, she felt free to play whatever she wanted, from classical pieces to her own compositions. On the 4th day, she was deep into a particularly challenging section of a Liszt sonata when a voice from the doorway made her jump. Don't stop on my account. Richard leaned against the doorframe, still in his travel coat. His face showed signs of fatigue, but his eyes were alert as they watched her. Mr. Hargrove. Sophia stood quickly. I didn't know you were back. Just arrived. He entered the room and set his briefcase down. That was Liszt, wasn't it? The B minor sonata? She nodded, surprised he recognized it. You know classical music? A slight smile touched his lips. My wife made sure I did. He approached the piano, running his fingers lightly over its polished surface. She loved Liszt, said he was a rock star before rock stars existed. It was the first time he'd mentioned his wife with anything other than pain in his voice. Sophia sat back down on the bench, giving him space to continue if he wanted. Eleanor was a music teacher at the university, he said after a moment. We met at a faculty concert. I was there supporting a friend who taught economics. His smile grew more pronounced. She thought I was completely uncultured when I admitted I couldn't tell Mozart from Beethoven. And now you can recognize Liszt by ear, Sophia observed. She was a good teacher. His expression darkened slightly. The piano was her graduation gift from her parents. She played every day right up until... He trailed off, then shook his head as if to clear it. After she died, I couldn't bear to hear it. It sat untouched until you came. Sophia didn't know what to say. This was the most personal conversation they'd had since she started working for him. I apologize if I've been difficult, Richard continued, surprising her further. Seeing you at the piano that first time, it brought back memories. I understand, Sophia said softly. I can stop playing if it's too painful for you. Richard shook his head. No. Eleanor would hate that this beautiful instrument was gathering dust. He looked directly at Sophia, his gaze intent. She would have liked you. Your playing reminds me of hers, passionate but disciplined. Thank you, Sophia said, touched by the comparison. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was. Richard checked his watch. I have calls to make. Please continue playing if you'd like. As he turned to leave, Sophia called after him. Mr. Hargrove? He paused in the doorway. Thank you for letting me use the piano. It means more than you know. He nodded once, then left her alone with the music. Over the next few weeks, a strange new dynamic developed between them. During working hours, Richard remained the demanding employer, pointing out missed spots and rearranged items with his usual critical eye. But in the late afternoons, when Sophia played the piano, he would sometimes appear silently in the doorway, listening for a while before disappearing back to his office. Occasionally, he would request specific pieces, mostly things his wife had loved. Sophia would play them, and sometimes he would stay to listen to the entire performance, his eyes closed, lost in memories she could only guess at. One rainy evening, after she'd played a particularly moving rendition of Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, Richard broke their usual pattern by sitting down in the armchair near the piano. You're rusty in places, he said, surprising her. But the talent is obvious. Why haven't you tried to go back? To finish your degree? Sophia closed the piano lid slowly. It's not that simple. My mother needs care and we need income. Music school is expensive and I've been away too long to qualify for my old scholarships. There are loans. Part-time programs, she shook her head. Concert pianists don't emerge from part-time programs, Mr. Hargrove, and at my age starting over. She sighed. The classical music world isn't kind to late bloomers. The competition is fierce even for prodigies who've never taken a break. Richard leaned forward, elbows on his knees. So you've given up, the word stung. I've accepted reality, she corrected. There's a difference, is there? He stood up and walked to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. My wife used to say that talent finds a way, that real artists can't help but create, no matter the obstacles. With all due respect, Sophia said, rising from the bench, it's easier to believe that when you have resources. Richard turned to face her, his expression thoughtful. What if you had resources? What would you do then? Sophia laughed without humor. That's a nice daydream, but humor me, he interrupted. If money wasn't an issue, what would your plan be? She hesitated, then decided to play along. I'd hire a proper caregiver for my mother. Find a good teacher to help me get back to performance level. Practice 6, maybe 8 hours a day until I was ready for auditions. And then? Competitions, she said, warming to the fantasy. They're the fastest way to get noticed. If I could place in one of the major ones, Van Cliburn, Tchaikovsky, Leeds, it would open doors. Concert opportunities, maybe even a recording contract eventually. Richard nodded, seemingly satisfied with her answer. You've thought about it. Of course I've thought about it, Sophia admitted. But thinking doesn't change facts. Facts can change, Richard said cryptically. He checked his watch. It's late. You should go home to your mother. As Sophia gathered her things to leave, she felt unsettled by their conversation. For a brief moment, she'd allowed herself to resurrect old dreams, and now it would be that much harder to put them away again. Miss Chen, Richard called as she reached the door. She turned back to find him watching her with an unreadable expression. Play the Rachmaninoff again tomorrow. It wasn't a request, but for once Sophia didn't mind the command. I will, she promised and stepped out into the rain. The following morning, Sophia arrived at the Hargrove estate to find an unfamiliar car in the driveway. As she entered through the service door, she heard voices coming from the music room, Richard's and a woman's she didn't recognize. She quietly hung up her coat and started toward the kitchen when Richard called out, Ms. Chen? Could you join us, please? Sophia hesitated, then smoothed her uniform and walked to the music room. Richard stood by the piano with an elegant woman in her 60s, her silver hair styled in a neat bob, her posture impeccable. Ms. Chen, this is Dr. Vivian Powell, Richard said formally. She's the head of the piano department at Westfield Conservatory. Sophia's heart skipped a beat. Westfield was one of the most prestigious music schools in the country, not quite Juilliard or Eastman, but certainly in the top tier. It's a pleasure to meet you, Dr. Powell said, extending her hand. Her grip was firm, her gaze appraising. Mr. Hargrove has told me about your playing. Sophia shot Richard a questioning look, but his face revealed nothing. It's an honor to meet you, she managed to say. Dr. Powell happened to be in town for a conference, Richard explained smoothly, though something in his tone suggested this meeting was far from coincidental. When I mentioned I had a former Eastman student working for me, she was intrigued. Former students who maintain their skills are always of interest, Dr. Powell agreed. Especially those with talent. She gestured to the piano. Would you mind playing something for me? Consider it a friendly assessment. Sophia felt unprepared and slightly ambushed. She was dressed for cleaning, not performing, and hadn't warmed up. But refusing wasn't an option, not with Richard watching her so intently. Of course, she said, moving to the piano bench. Any particular requests? Your choice, Dr. Powell said, settling into a nearby chair. Something that showcases your technical ability and your musicality. Sophia took a deep breath and chose Beethoven's Appassionata Sonata. It was challenging enough to demonstrate her skills, but familiar enough that she could play it without music. As she began, her initial nervousness faded, replaced by the focus that always came when she lost herself in playing. For 15 minutes, the room was filled with the powerful, emotional music of Beethoven. When she finished, her hands were trembling slightly, and she felt both exhilarated and drained. Dr. Powell was silent for a moment, her expression thoughtful. Impressive, she said finally, especially for someone who hasn't been studying formally. There are rough edges, of course. Your technique has suffered from lack of consistent practice, but the musicality is there and the understanding of the piece. Thank you, Sophia said, unsure if this was praise or criticism. Play something else, Dr. Powell requested. Something more contemporary. Prokofiev, perhaps? Or Gershwin? Sophia chose Gershwin's Prelude No. 2, with its bluesy, jazz-influenced style, a complete contrast to the Beethoven. When she finished, Dr. Powell was smiling. You have range, she noted, and flexibility, important qualities in a modern performer. Richard, who had been standing quietly by the window, finally spoke. Dr. Powell has a proposition for you, Miss Chen. The older woman nodded. Westfield has a special program for exceptional mature students, those who've taken unconventional paths. It includes advanced training, performance opportunities, and in some cases, financial assistance. Sophia's heart began to race. I don't understand. Mr. Hargrove suggested I might want to hear you play, Dr. Powell explained. Based on what I've heard, I'd like to invite you to audition formally for our program. It would mean 6 months of intensive study, followed by a recital and potential placement in our concert artist diploma track. The room seemed to spin slightly. I don't know what to say. Say you'll consider it, Richard interjected. The audition is in 3 weeks. Dr. Powell has graciously agreed to work with you once a week until then to help you prepare. Sophia looked between them, bewildered by this turn of events. Mr. Hargrove, I appreciate this opportunity, but I have responsibilities. My mother will be well taken care of, Richard finished for her. I've already spoken with a highly recommended home health care agency. They can provide part-time assistance while you practice and attend lessons. I can't afford. Consider it an advance, he said firmly, against future earnings. When you're playing Carnegie Hall, you can pay me back with interest. Dr. Powell rose from her chair. I'll give you some privacy to discuss the details. Ms. Chen, I look forward to our first session next Wednesday if you decide to proceed. She handed Sophia a business card. My direct number is on there. Call me with any questions. After she left, Sophia turned to Richard, struggling to process what had just happened. Why? She asked simply. Richard walked to the piano, running his fingers lightly over its surface. Eleanor always said talent was a terrible thing to waste. She believed that music could heal people, not just the listeners but the performers too. But why me? You barely know me. He looked at her directly then. I know enough. I know you gave up your dreams to take care of your mother. I know you clean houses all day and still find energy to play with passion. And I know what it's like to have your life change in an instant, to lose the future you thought was certain. Sophia sat down on the piano bench, feeling overwhelmed. This is too much. I can't accept. Yes, you can, Richard interrupted. And you will, because the alternative is to spend the rest of your life wondering what might have been. His voice softened slightly. Take it from someone who knows. That's a special kind of hell. She looked up at him, seeing past his usual reserve to the pain that still lived behind his eyes. What happened to your wife? It changed you. It destroyed me, he corrected quietly. Eleanor was the heart of everything. When she died, I buried myself in work, in making money that suddenly had no purpose. He gestured around the room. All this means nothing without someone to share. And my playing reminds you of her, Sophia said, understanding dawning. That's why you're doing this. Partly, Richard admitted, but also because it's the right thing to do. Talent like yours shouldn't be cleaning floors and dusting shelves. It should be heard. Sophia thought of her mother, of their tiny apartment, of the bills that kept piling up. I don't know if I can do this. It's been so long since I've performed seriously. What if I fail? Then you'll know you tried, Richard said simply. Isn't that better than never knowing? She stared at the piano keys, feeling as though she stood at a crossroads. I need to talk to my mother. Of course, Richard nodded. Take the rest of the day. Sort things out with your mother. But Ms. Chen... He paused until she looked up at him. Don't let fear make this decision for you. That evening, Sophia sat with her mother in their small living room, explaining everything that had happened. Lena listened quietly, her weathered hands folded in her lap. So this rich man wants to pay for you to study music again, she summarized when Sophia finished. And hire someone to help care for me while you do. It's more complicated than that, Sophia said. He says it's a loan, but you think he won't expect repayment? Her mother asked shrewdly. I don't know what he expects, Sophia admitted. I barely understand why he's doing this at all. Lena reached for her daughter's hand. Sometimes people do kind things because they can, because it heals something in them to help others. Or because they feel guilty, Sophia countered, or lonely, or they want something. Perhaps, her mother acknowledged. Does it matter? Sophia sighed, squeezing her mother's fingers gently. What if I can't do it anymore? What if I'm not good enough? Lena smiled. When you were 6 years old, you practiced the same piece for 8 hours straight because you couldn't get it perfect. Your fingers were so sore I had to soak them in warm water. You have always been good enough, Sophia. You've just forgotten. And what about you? I can't leave you with strangers. I am not a child, Lena said firmly. I am your mother, and I want what mothers have always wanted for my daughter to fulfill her potential. She touched Sophia's cheek gently. You gave up your dreams for me once. I won't let you do it again. 3 days later, Sophia found herself in Richard's home office, signing papers for what he called a professional development agreement. The terms were surprisingly generous, a stipend for living expenses, coverage for her mother's care, and a schedule that would allow her to continue some housekeeping duties while focusing primarily on her music. You'll still clean the music room, Richard said, a hint of amusement in his voice. Consider it rent for using the piano. This still feels unreal, Sophia admitted, setting down the pen after signing the final page. Like I'll wake up tomorrow and it will all have been a dream. It's quite real, Richard assured her. And starting Monday, you'll begin a new practice regimen. Dr. Powell has sent over a recommended schedule, 6 hours daily, with specific technical exercises and repertoire. Sophia nodded, both excited and terrified by the prospect. Mr. Hargrove, I don't know how to thank you. Play well, he said simply. That's all the thanks I need. The following weeks passed in a blur of practice, lessons, and preparation. True to his word, Richard arranged for a caregiver to visit Lena daily, helping with meals, medications, and companionship. Sophia continued cleaning the Hargrove estate 3 mornings a week, but her afternoons and evenings were devoted entirely to the piano. Dr. Powell proved to be a demanding teacher, pointing out flaws in Sophia's technique that years of self-teaching had allowed to develop. There were moments of frustration and tears, days when Sophia questioned whether she'd made the right decision. But there were also breakthroughs, moments when a difficult passage finally flowed effortlessly, when she recaptured the joy of making music that had been her constant companion in younger years. Richard rarely interrupted her practice sessions, but she would occasionally look up to find him standing in the doorway listening. Sometimes he would nod in approval before disappearing back to his office. Other times he would frown slightly and make a note on his ever-present phone. One evening, 2 weeks before the audition, Sophia was struggling with a particularly challenging Chopin etude. Her fingers felt clumsy, and the notes kept tangling together in a muddy mess. After her 5th failed attempt, she slammed her hands down on the keys in frustration. That won't help. Richard's voice came from behind her. Sophia whirled around, embarrassed by her outburst. Sorry, I didn't know you were there. Clearly. He entered the room and leaned against the piano. What's the problem? she sighed, flexing her tired fingers. This passage? It needs to be light and quick, but I keep fumbling it. Richard considered this. Eleanor used to say that when technique fails, it's usually because the mind is racing ahead of the hands. Try slowing down your thoughts, not just your playing. Sophia looked at him in surprise. That's actually good advice. A hint of a smile touched his lips. I did pay attention sometimes. She turned back to the piano and tried again, forcing herself to think through each note rather than rushing to the next. The passage flowed more smoothly. Better, Richard observed. You're making progress. Sophia closed the music score, suddenly aware of how late it had become. I should head home. Mom will be waiting up. Before you go, Richard said, his tone shifting to something more formal. There's something I need to discuss with you. Sophia tensed, wondering if he was having second thoughts about their arrangement. The audition? He continued. Dr. Powell mentioned that several important people will be attending. Potential patrons, critics, even some concert programmers. Yes, she told me. Sophia tried not to think about it too much. The pressure was already overwhelming. I've invited a few business associates as well, Richard said. People who appreciate fine music and might be in a position to help your career. Sophia nodded slowly, understanding what he wasn't saying. This was more than just an audition for a school program. It was a debut of sorts, her introduction to the musical world she'd left behind years ago. I'll do my best not to embarrass you, she said, only half joking. Richard's expression softened. That's not what concerns me. I'm worried about you putting too much pressure on yourself. Remember, this is just the first step. Whatever happens at the audition, your journey doesn't end there. Spoken like someone who's never had to perform Rachmaninoff in front of a room full of critics, Sophia said dryly. True enough, Richard acknowledged with a slight smile. But I have closed multi-million-dollar deals with rooms full of sharks who would happily have torn me apart if I showed any weakness. The principle is the same. Breathe, focus, and remember why you're there. Their eyes met, and for a moment, Sophia saw behind his usual reserve to the person underneath, someone who genuinely wanted her to succeed, not just for his own purposes, but for hers. Thank you, she said quietly, for everything. Richard nodded once, then checked his watch. It's late. I'll have Jerome drive you home. As Sophia gathered her music, she felt a curious mix of anxiety and hope. In 2 weeks, her life could change completely. Again. The thought was terrifying, but for the first time in years, it was also thrilling. The day of the audition arrived with gray skies and a light drizzle that matched Sophia's nervous mood. She'd barely slept the night before, her mind racing through the pieces she would perform, imagining every possible mistake she might make. Her mother had made her favorite breakfast, rice porridge with an egg and green onions. But Sophia could only manage a few bites. You need to eat, Lena urged, pushing the bowl closer. A pianist needs strength in her fingers. I don't think I can, Sophia admitted, her stomach in knots. What if I freeze up there? What if I forget everything? Lena reached across the table to touch her daughter's hand. The music is in you, not just in your memory. Your fingers know what to do. She smiled gently. And I will be there watching my daughter shine. Richard had arranged for Lena to attend the audition, sending a special wheelchair-accessible car to bring her to Westfield Conservatory. It was a kindness Sophia hadn't expected, and it had brought tears to her mother's eyes when she told her. Mr. Hargrove seems different from how you first described him, Lena observed as she helped Sophia select an outfit for the performance. Less the demanding boss, more the supportive patron. He's complicated, Sophia said, settling on a simple black dress that was elegant without being flashy. I still don't fully understand why he's doing all this. Perhaps he sees in you what his wife would have valued, her mother suggested. Or perhaps he is seeking redemption through your talent. Redemption from what? Lena shrugged. We all have regrets, Sophia. Things left unsaid, opportunities missed. Perhaps helping you is his way of making peace with his own past. Sophia pondered this as she pinned her hair into a neat bun. The Richard she'd come to know these past weeks was indeed different from the cold, demanding employer who had hired her months ago. There were still glimpses of that man in his perfectionism, his occasional impatience, but she'd also seen his kindness, his dry humor, his genuine appreciation for music. The intercom buzzed, announcing the car's arrival. Sophia took a deep breath, checking her appearance one final time in the mirror. "Ready?" her mother asked, adjusting her own scarf. Sophia nodded, though ready was the last thing she felt. "As I'll ever be." The drive to Westfield Conservatory took 30 minutes, during which Sophia sat quietly reviewing the music in her head. Her mother seemed to understand her need for silence, occupying herself with watching the city pass by outside the window. When they arrived, Richard was waiting at the entrance, dressed in an impeccable charcoal suit. He helped the driver set up Lena's wheelchair and introduced himself to her with a formal handshake. "Mrs. Chen, it's a pleasure to finally meet you. Your daughter speaks of you often, and she has told me much about you." "Mr. Hargrove," Lena replied with a smile that suggested she might know more than Sophia had actually shared. Richard turned to Sophia, his expression serious. "The auditorium is almost full. Dr. Powell asked me to bring you directly to the warm-up room when you arrived." Sophia's heart began to race. "Full? How many people are here?" "Does it matter? You'll be playing for the music, not the audience." He gestured toward the building. "Shall we?" Inside, the conservatory was buzzing with activity. Students hurried through the hallways with instrument cases, and the sound of practice rooms in use created a cacophony of competing melodies. Richard led them to an elevator, then down a corridor to a small room with an upright piano. "You have 20 minutes, he said, checking his watch. "Dr. Powell will come for you when it's time." Lena wheeled herself next to the piano. "I'll stay with her." "You should take your seat, Mr. Hargrove." He nodded, then surprised Sophia by briefly touching her shoulder. "Remember what we discussed. Breathe, focus, you're ready for this." After he left, Sophia sat at the piano, flexing her fingers and playing a few scales to warm up. The keys felt different from Richard's Steinway, slightly stiffer, the action not as smooth. She would need to adjust her touch. "He cares about you," her mother observed quietly. Sophia's fingers faltered on a scale. "He cares about the music." "Perhaps both," Lena suggested. "I've seen how he looks at you, like someone seeing color after living in black and white." "Mom," Sophia protested, feeling her cheeks warm. "It's not like that. He was devoted to his wife, and she is gone," her mother said gently. "But you are here, bringing music back into his home, into his life." Before Sophia could respond, there was a knock at the door, and Dr. Powell entered, elegant in a burgundy suit, her silver hair gleaming under the fluorescent lights. "It's time," she said, her expression encouraging but serious. "Are you ready, Ms. Chen?" Sophia stood, smoothing her dress with suddenly damp palms. "As ready as I'll be." Dr. Powell led them through a side door into the auditorium. Sophia's breath caught as she saw the crowd. At least 200 people filled the seats, their murmured conversations creating a low hum that died down as she approached the stage. In the front row, she spotted Richard sitting beside several distinguished-looking older people she didn't recognize. He caught her eye and gave a slight nod of encouragement. Dr. Powell stepped to the microphone at center stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today for this special audition." Sophia Chen comes to us with an unconventional background. 3 years at Eastman School of Music, followed by a hiatus to care for family. Today, she will perform works by Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, and Rachmaninoff to demonstrate her technical ability and musical interpretation. She turned to Sophia with an encouraging smile. "The stage is yours, Ms. Chen." Walking to the gleaming grand piano at center stage, Sophia felt as though she were moving through water, her limbs heavy with nerves. She adjusted the bench, took a deep breath, and placed her hands on the keys. For a terrifying moment, her mind went completely blank. But then she looked toward the front row, where her mother sat in her wheelchair, eyes shining with pride, and next to her, Richard. His usual reserve softened into something like anticipation. Sophia closed her eyes, took another breath, and began to play Bach's Prelude in C major. Simple, pure notes that flowed one into another like a gentle stream. By the time she reached the final measures, the initial panic had subsided, replaced by the familiar focus that came when she lost herself in music. She moved through her program with growing confidence. The dramatic intensity of Beethoven's Pathétique Sonata, the delicate emotion of Chopin's Nocturne in B-flat minor. With each piece, she felt more at home on the stage, as if the years away had been merely a brief interruption, rather than a seemingly permanent end. For her final piece, she'd chosen Rachmaninoff's Prelude in G minor, a work of sweeping drama and technical challenges that showcased her range. As she played the thundering chords and lightning-fast passages, she felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the pure joy of making music not just for herself, but for an audience. When the final notes faded, there was a moment of complete silence. Then the applause began, tentative at first, then building to enthusiastic approval. Sophia rose from the bench, her legs shaky, and bowed deeply to the audience. Dr. Powell returned to the microphone, her face wreathed in a genuine smile. "Thank you, Ms. Chen, for a truly remarkable performance. The committee will deliberate and contact you with our decision within the week." As Sophia left the stage, she was immediately surrounded by her mother and Richard. "You were magnificent," Lena said, tears in her eyes, "just as you were always meant to be." Richard's face showed a mixture of pride and something more complex, a kind of wonder, as if he'd witnessed something unexpected. "Well done," he said simply, but the warmth in his voice conveyed more than the words. Before they could say more, a small crowd gathered around them, members of the committee, other faculty, and several well-dressed strangers who Richard seemed to know. Sophia found herself shaking hands, accepting compliments, answering questions about her background and training. One elderly gentleman in a beautifully tailored suit introduced himself as the director of the city's chamber music society. "We have an opening in our spring recital series," he told her. "A young pianist had to withdraw due to injury. Would you be interested in filling the spot? The honorarium is modest, but the exposure is valuable." Sophia blinked in surprise, looking to Richard and Dr. Powell, who had joined their circle. That's very kind, but I haven't even been accepted to the program yet." "Consider this a separate opportunity," the man said with a smile. "Talent deserves a stage, regardless of formal affiliations." Dr. Powell nodded encouragingly. "It would be excellent experience, Ms. Chen, and I think I can speak for the committee when I say your acceptance to our program is a formality at this point." The next hour passed in a blur of conversations and introductions. By the time they finally left the conservatory, Sophia felt both exhilarated and exhausted. In the car on the way home, she sat quietly, trying to process everything that had happened. "You've made quite an impression," Richard observed, breaking the silence. "Anton Kirkland doesn't offer recital spots to just anyone." "I still can't believe any of this is happening," Sophia admitted. "A month ago I was dusting your bookshelves and worrying about paying the electric bill, and now you're planning your concert debut," her mother said proudly. "Life can change in an instant, for better as well as worse." Richard's phone chimed with a message. He read it quickly, then looked up with a satisfied expression. "Dr. Powell says the committee vote was unanimous. You're officially accepted to the program with a full scholarship and stipend. Congratulations." Sophia felt tears spring to her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered, unable to find adequate words for everything he'd done. Richard's usual reserve seemed to soften. "Don't thank me. This was your achievement. I merely opened a door. You walked through it on your own talent." When they reached Sophia and Lena's apartment building, Richard insisted on helping Lena with her wheelchair while the driver carried Sophia's things. "I'd like to discuss next steps," he said as they reached their door. "Perhaps dinner tomorrow evening? There are practical matters to arrange. Your reduced housekeeping schedule, practice time, your mother's care." "Dinner would be lovely," Lena answered before Sophia could speak. "But not at our small apartment. You must come to a proper Chinese restaurant. I know just the place." Richard looked momentarily surprised, then nodded. "I would be honored, Mrs. Chen." After he left, Sophia turned to her mother with raised eyebrows. "What was that about?" Lena smiled innocently. "I simply want to thank the man who has helped my daughter return to her rightful path." "Is that so strange?" "No, but... and perhaps I wish to know him better," her mother continued, wheeling herself into the living room. "To understand what kind of man invests so much in a housekeeper's talent." Sophia followed, shaking her head. "Mom, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking..." "I think many things," Lena interrupted serenely. "Most of them turn out to be right." That night, Sophia lay awake in bed, replaying the day's events. The audition, the offer of a recital, the scholarship, it all seemed like a dream from which she might wake at any moment. And then there was Richard, whose motives remained something of a mystery to her. Was her mother right? Was there more to his interest than music and memories of his late wife? And if there was, how did she feel about it? Sophia turned these questions over in her mind until sleep finally claimed her, bringing dreams of music and applause and a pair of intense eyes watching her from the shadows. The following evening, Sophia dressed carefully for dinner, choosing a simple blue dress she hadn't worn in years. Her mother nodded approval as she helped pin Lena's silver-streaked hair into an elegant knot. "You look beautiful," Lena said, studying her daughter's reflection in the mirror. "Like the professional artist you were always meant to be, not a housekeeper." "I'm still a housekeeper," Sophia reminded her. "Just one with unusual circumstances," Lena smiled knowingly. "For now." Richard arrived precisely on time, dressed more casually than Sophia had ever seen him, in dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that softened his usually formal appearance. He brought flowers for Lena and, to Sophia's surprise, a small gift box for her. "Open it," he encouraged when she hesitated. Inside was a delicate silver pin in the shape of a piano. "It was Eleanor's," he explained quietly. "She wore it for good luck at performances. I thought she would want you to have it." Sophia touched the pin gently, moved by the gesture. "I'll treasure it," she promised, "and wear it at the recital." Something flickered in Richard's eyes, a mixture of pain and satisfaction. She would have liked that. At the restaurant, a small family-owned place with red lanterns and the aroma of authentic Chinese cuisine, Lena took charge, ordering dishes in rapid Mandarin that made the servers smile and nod appreciatively. "My mother was a formidable cook," she explained to Richard. "She taught me that food is a language of its own." As they ate, the conversation flowed more easily than Sophia had expected. Richard spoke of his business, commercial real estate development, and listened with genuine interest as Lena told stories of her years as a music teacher. "So musical talent runs in the family," he observed, looking between mother and daughter. "As does stubbornness," Lena agreed with a smile. "And pride. My daughter gets both from me." When the topic turned to the upcoming recital and Sophia's new schedule, Richard became more businesslike, outlining a plan that would allow her to balance her studies with reduced housekeeping duties. "You'll need to focus primarily on your music now," he said. "I've arranged for additional household staff to cover most of your previous responsibilities." "But I'll still clean the music room," Sophia said with a small smile, remembering their agreement. "Consider it your practice studio now," Richard replied. "Though yes, keeping it tidy would be appreciated." As the meal concluded, Lena excused herself to speak with the restaurant owner, an old friend, leaving Sophia and Richard alone at the table. "Your mother is remarkable," Richard said, watching Lena chat animatedly across the room. "I see where you get your strength." "And my stubbornness," Sophia added with a smile. Richard turned to face her, his expression suddenly serious. "I want to be clear about something. What happened yesterday, your success at the audition, the recital offer, that was all you. Your talent, your hard work. With your support," Sophia pointed out. "I wouldn't have been there without you." "Perhaps not yesterday," he acknowledged. "But eventually someone would have discovered you. Talent like yours doesn't stay hidden forever." Their eyes met across the table, and Sophia felt a curious warmth spread through her chest. For the first time, she allowed herself to really look at him. Not as her employer or benefactor, but simply as a man. A complicated, sometimes difficult man, but one who had changed her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. "Thank you," she said softly. "Not just for yesterday, but for hearing me when I thought no one was listening." 6 months later, Sophia stood backstage at Franklin Hall, the city's premier concert venue, trying to calm the butterflies in her stomach. Through a gap in the curtains, she could see the audience filing in. Hundreds of people in formal attire, programs in hand, their excited chatter creating a buzz of anticipation. Nervous? She turned to find Richard approaching, impeccable in a tuxedo, a single white rose in his hand. Over the past months, as she'd balanced her studies at Westfield with practice and smaller performances, he'd become not just her patron but her friend, confidant, and most constant supporter. Terrified, Sophia admitted, accepting the rose with a smile. "This is so much bigger than the recital last spring. And you're so much more prepared now," he reminded her. "Dr. Powell says you've made more progress in 6 months than most students do in 2 years. Sophia touched the silver piano pin fastened to her black concert gown. "Eleanor's pin for luck?" You don't need luck, Richard said, his eyes warm. But yes, she'd be proud to see you wearing it tonight. From the awkward employer-employee relationship they'd once had, something new had grown, a connection based on mutual respect, shared love of music, and increasingly, something deeper neither had fully acknowledged. Where's Mom? Sophia asked, peering past him into the bustling backstage area. Front row center, being thoroughly spoiled by Dr. Powell and half the conservatory faculty, Richard assured her. I've never seen her look happier. Lena's health had improved remarkably over the past months. The care Richard had arranged, combined with her excitement over Sophia's renewed career, seemed to have given her new energy. She'd even started teaching piano again. Just a few students, children from the neighborhood who came to their new apartment. A spacious ground-floor unit Richard had helped them find that was fully accessible for Lena's wheelchair. A stagehand appeared, clipboard in hand. 5 minutes, Ms. Chen. Sophia took a deep breath, smoothing her gown. This still feels like a dream sometimes. Like I'll wake up and be back cleaning your house, dreaming about playing again. Richard shook his head. This was always your reality, Sophia. The cleaning was the detour. He hesitated, then added quietly, though I'm selfishly glad for that detour. Otherwise our paths might never have crossed. Before she could respond, Dr. Powell approached, elegant in midnight blue. It's time, Sophia. The hall is full and they're ready for you. With a final encouraging nod from Richard, Sophia followed her mentor to the wings. Tonight was the culmination of everything she'd worked for these past months. Her debut as a featured soloist with the City Orchestra, performing Rachmaninoff's Piano Concerto No. 2, a piece as challenging as it was beloved. As the orchestra finished tuning and the conductor took the podium, Dr. Powell squeezed Sophia's hand. Remember what I told you. The audience wants you to succeed. They're here to be moved, not to judge. Sophia nodded, thinking of how far she'd come from that day Richard had first heard her play his late wife's piano. From housekeeper to concert pianist in less than a year, a journey that still amazed her. The conductor gestured toward the wings, and Sophia walked onto the stage, the spotlight finding her as the audience applauded. She bowed gracefully, then took her place at the magnificent grand piano at center stage. In the front row she saw her mother, beautiful in a new cheongsam, her eyes shining with pride. Beside her sat Richard, his expression a mixture of anticipation and something that looked remarkably like love. The conductor raised his baton, and the orchestra began the opening phrases of the concerto. Sophia's hands found the keys and the music flowed through her, not just notes on a page, but a story of loss and rediscovery, of dreams deferred and reborn. As she played, memories flashed through her mind. The dusty piano in Richard's music room, her mother's encouragement despite their struggles, Dr. Powell's demanding but nurturing guidance, and Richard, always Richard, believing in her talent when she'd almost stopped believing herself. The concerto's sweeping romanticism suited her mood perfectly, its passionate themes rising and falling like the journey her life had taken. When she reached the final movement, her fingers danced across the keys with confidence and joy, building to the thunderous conclusion that brought the audience to their feet before the final notes had even faded. The applause was deafening. Sophia rose from the bench, her heart pounding, and bowed deeply to the audience, then to the orchestra and conductor. Flowers appeared from somewhere, handed to her by the concertmaster, a huge bouquet of white roses and lilies. After 3 curtain calls, Sophia finally left the stage, only to be engulfed in a flurry of congratulations from musicians, staff, and fellow students. Dr. Powell hugged her tightly. Magnificent, the older woman whispered. You've arrived, my dear. When she finally made her way to the reception area, Sophia found her mother surrounded by admirers, holding court from her wheelchair with the dignity of a queen. Lena's face lit up when she saw her daughter. There she is, she announced proudly to everyone nearby. My Sophia, who plays from her heart. Sophia knelt beside her mother's chair, taking her weathered hands. Everything I am, I owe to you, she said softly in Mandarin. Lena touched her cheek gently. No, daughter. Your gift is your own. I merely helped you find it. The crowd parted slightly, and Richard approached carrying 2 glasses of champagne. He handed one to Sophia with a smile that made her heart skip. To new beginnings, he said, clinking his glass against hers. The reception lasted for hours. Critics wanted interviews, Patrons wanted introductions, and fellow musicians wanted to discuss her interpretation of the Rachmaninoff. Through it all, Richard remained nearby, sometimes at her side, sometimes watching from across the room with an expression that made her